Joining me now is writer and broadcaster Esther Krakue. Esther, Harry's court case against News Group newspapers, it's back in the headlines. What's the update?
So the update is the justice presiding over this case has allowed Prince Harry and his legal team to access emails between senior members of the royal household and the newspaper group, particularly senior executives, between 2013 and 2019. Now, he put in this request because his legal team argued that the newspaper group had cherry-picked the emails correspondence that they had between the royal palace in that time period, and Prince Harry's team argued that they actually need all the access to all the emails for a full picture, just to see all the correspondence that went between the two parties. And newspaper group opposed this originally, saying that, you know, trying to extract those emails from a 6-year period that happened over a decade ago will cost them about £17,000. But this is a win for Prince Harry's legal team, because it looks like this is probably going to go to court, and the trial is due to start in January. Now, Prince Harry is one of only two other people that are prosecuting this case. All the other 39 people that were involved in this initial case have settled. They settled at some point last year, but Prince Harry is really pursuing this. Now, this is a bit of a kind of a bit of a hunt, because if they find nothing in these email correspondence that actually proves Prince Harry's case of unlawful information gathering and all of that, they're a bit stuck. And that's what the News UK's legal team are arguing. You know, is there specific information that he's looking for? I personally find it very difficult to believe that any sort of correspondence with regards to unlawful information gathering with the senior executives at News UK would have been so reckless to put that in email correspondence to the palace. What I suspect is probably going to happen is the same sort of correspondence that other newspaper groups had with the royal palace, which would probably update and things that they were allowed to put in the press. But Prince Harry is very adamant that some sort of unlawful information gathering happened. Whether he is confident enough that he'll find that in an email of a senior executive saying, "Hey, go and hack Prince Harry," is something you know, completely beyond the pale, I think, and would be very rare and unique to see. But we'll have to wait and see. The trial does start in a couple of months, so, you know, everyone is kind of anticipating what information comes from this.
Yeah, and look, it's unlikely that it's there, but I tell you what, if it is there, it will be explosive. Now, speaking of scandals, and in this week we've seen the resignation of the Archbishop of Canterbury. Now, what does this mean for the King as the head of the church, and how is the Archbishop replaced?
So the Archbishop will be replaced. The new Archbishop will be elected through a council, and then the King has to assent to this new pick effectively. So he won't be directly involved. All he has to give is royal consent. We know that the King is not too political in that way. But it is interesting watching the Archbishop, well, now soon to be former Archbishop Justin Welby's relationship with the King. We know that he was a very prominent figure in the King's life, particularly after the death of both of his parents and his coronation, and the fallout with the Sussexes, which the Archbishop is said to have instructed the King on how to forgive and move on. So he was a real spiritual guide and leader for the King, and they developed this quite close relationship. The problem is the way that the Archbishop is leaving in utter disgrace, having allowed his inaction to let a known child abuser go free, who then passed, I believe, in 2018 or 2019, is really quite scandalous. Now, I can say that there's not really a lot of love lost between the Archbishop and the general British public more widely. He did kind of get his nose into quite contentious issues. He was overtly political. I mean, he was so political that at some point, a lot of his iterations didn't even make it to the press. I mean, newspapers weren't even covering it because they're just like, oh, that's just Welby, which is weird because you would expect the Archbishop of Canterbury to have some sort of moral weight. He made a lot of controversial comments about the Rwanda scheme, which was a highly political issue, and he infamously didn't offer an alternative solution. So for all the communities that were trying to find a solution to this growing illegal migrant crisis, he was just saying, yeah, don't send them to Rwanda, but he didn't offer an alternative. And these are the kinds of interventions that really made him unpopular. Unfortunately, he didn't really sort of take the royal family's stance of being above the political fray and really understanding his role in the job. So I think after all of that, after years of political interventions and all these controversies, to leave in such disgrace, while I'm sure the King is disappointed, I'm sure he's also not surprised.
Yeah, and it will be very interesting to see who his replacement is, and obviously whoever is the next Archbishop, what kind of role and what kind of position they take going forward. Now, with the marking of Remembrance Day, now Prince Harry has had a message for veterans. He was obviously involved in active duty himself. What did he have to say?
So Prince Harry, we know that he's always stood up for veterans and lauded their service and being a veteran himself, we know that's something that he takes very seriously, especially being part of or creating the Invictus Games, and it's basically his MO now that he's left the royal family. Unfortunately, a lot of his comments or any kind of interventions that he has with regards to veterans around the world, particularly in the US, doesn't really go down very well. He's seen as this kind of upstart, he was never really in danger when he was in Afghanistan with his tours there. He really disgraced himself with the publication of Spare and putting his kill count when he was in Afghanistan. These are the kinds of things that have really left him in disrepute. And unfortunately, even though Remembrance Day is one of the key calendars, particularly for veterans in this country, he really seems to have struck quite a negative note. People are saying, who is this guy accepting awards on behalf of of people that or accepting awards, even though there are people that are more deserving of them. This is the only thing that he's known for. He's never really done anything or achieved anything substantial. He's kind of disgraced being in the armed forces by talking about tawdry things like the number of people he killed and really putting his family's lives in danger by saying it was members of the Taliban as well. So unfortunately, even though he did talk about service and sacrifice and all of that, he himself, his behavior in the last few years have really put a lot of veterans off. And it's quite unfortunate, because if he had stayed in the army, if he'd stayed in the royal forces, he would have, in the armed forces, he would have been able to do a lot more good than kind of what he's done afterwards, and just talking as if he has any sort of moral authority, which many veterans think he no longer does.
Well, I think that's a very fair observation. Now, we know Meghan is planning a new Netflix show, but we understand it's not going to air for some time. When should we expect to see it, and what's the delay? I've only got about 30 seconds left.
So we're still waiting on on Meghan's series. We know that it's going to come out at the very earliest in late spring of next year. We know that the Netflix deal is up for renewal, I believe, in September of next year. So if this is not a hit, I suspect this will probably be the end of their relationship with Netflix. They seem to have missed a lot of targets, and it just doesn't look very good for the couple and their sort of production dreams and their dreams of becoming big in Tinseltown and influencing the world. But their good work. It's not looking very good, and I'm not sure a cooking show is going to be something that would revive that dying relationship, but let's see.
Very good. Esther Krakue, thank you so much for joining us.